สวัสดีครับยินดีต้อนรับสู่รายการ What's Happening in Thailand สัปดาห์นี้ผมได้รับเกียรติพูดคุยถึงที่ทางการเมืองไทยกับแขกคนพิเศษของเราคุณพิธาลิมจารันรัตน์อดีตผู้นำพรรคก้าวไกลขอบคุณมากนะครับคุณพิธา
ขอบคุณครับขอบคุณที่เชิญผมมาครับ
Soon you will face a decision from the Constitutional Court that will decide your future, and you could be banned for life as well as your party dissolved. And so today, I want to talk to you about the past, the present, and the future of the current moment that you are in. That said, looking back at your campaign,
right,
considering the future as well,
right,
is there anything that you would have done differently as an MP, as a PM candidate, a member of the Move Forward Party?
Professionally, no regrets, no time for regrets. Personally, I would have made sure that my health was a bit better, that I was a bit stronger. I mean, I gave it my 100%, whether it's the debates, whether it's the campaign trail, traveling almost every district in Thailand, and I gave it my all. But my health was about 6 out of 10 at the time. You know, I just came out of a surgery from my neck. You know, I had a 2-year-old, 3-year-old to take care of when I started politics, so my health was not very good. Next time, now that I have some more time, if there's ever another election for me, you know, as per your questions, if I have a chance again, this time I'll make sure I have more stamina and more strong, both like physically and mentally, and also, you know, the way I do my politics.
So in terms of politics and policy, is there anything specifically that you would have done differently?
No, I think I was very honest with the situation externally and internally. You know, we were running for office for change, and as a member of parliament, you have to have that kind of linkages with the society. I think what you're trying to do, you know, if I read your mind correctly, is you are trying to go against the amendment of 112, whether I would just turn back or not. But the answer, if I'm right, is because there's a linkages to the people, and it's really the situation that happens on the streets, you know, and it's been around for many years. And back during the previous government of Kunabisit Vechachua, there was also an advice on Article 112 amendment. And, you know, if there's no clash, you know, between the people and the institution, then we never thought about thinking about amending it. But because of the situation back a couple of years ago on the street, that we felt like, you know, amending it was a common ground. And doing it in the parliament is the best place to do it rather than leaving it on the streets or leaving it on social media. Okay. So we felt like it was a common ground. So if I were to return, you know, we would do the same thing, but the details might be different. I mean, now that we know that the Constitutional Court have decided what can be done and what cannot be done, I use my opportunity to explain a couple of things in terms of the details now to the court, you know, why we need to reduce the minimum sentence or why we have to have an accountable organization to file for the case, rather than made it into a freedom of whoever files for it, and we explain the situation. In short, it's for proportionality of law. You know, if there's an infringement of freedom, the penalty should be proportionate to it, and I think that's the best way to keep Thailand a constitutional monarchy going forward sustainably.
So also speaking of your past and the decision-making with regards to the political decision-making in terms of like when you were an MP and when you were campaigning. I'm curious about your education in America. You attended Harvard. And there's a lot of people who believe that perhaps there is some influence from the American education that you had on your political or even personal decision-making. The time living in America, how was that for you? And has it influenced your business here?
The question is on point with many of the establishment here in Thailand, the conservatives. They're thinking I'm too Americanized. They're thinking I'm product of CIA. They're thinking that my Harvard education was funded by CIA, which apparently is absurd. None of that is true. First of all, the class was about 50-50. 50% Americans and 50% international students. So in all the classroom, it cannot be monopolized just by American thinking. They have from various nationalities, from various race, various classes. Some of them are private wealth or investment banker from Italy, and one survived genocide from Rwanda, for example. So when we talk about poverty, when we talk about inequality, it's not just going to be, just based on American views or anything like that. But the question asked about the influence I had, because when I was in America a couple of times, first time was in Texas. That was when Bush was going against Al Gore. And the second time was when Obama was going against campaign. So it's the campaign management of things, what phone booth is for, why you have to have this kind of volunteer management inside the organization, and campaign finance with the lobbyists and things like that. So I went with Bernie Sanders, average donation of $15 to make sure I have the autonomy in terms of policy making and speaking up my mind. So that's how Move Forward Party in terms of campaign management and election management was very much based on my textbook back at Harvard, and I turned it into reality here, precision politics. I mean, if we go through this route, I know exactly which roof is yellow, which roof is green, and which roof is red. Meaning, if it's green, then they would vote for me. I need to show up once and then explain to them what I'm trying to do. Yellow is swing votes. So very much like American-style politics. But apart from that, in terms of thinking, in terms of domestic policy, in terms of foreign policy, hey, my last name is Limjaroenrat. It's as Chinese as it gets. So, it has to be a balance between the Sino and American rivalry. And foreign policy is not a buffet. Mm-hmm. It's not like if I'm in the Chinese camp, everything is correct. Or if I'm in the American camp, everything is correct. It has to be an a la carte of whichever policy is of mutual benefit of both the American people or the Thai people or the Chinese people and the Chinese people and the Thai people.
The outcome was not what you and many people had hoped for. Mm-hmm. The Move Forward Party tried to make a coalition with Pheu Thai Party, who's now leading the government. I'm wondering if there's any areas of commonalities still, mm-hmm. Or areas of difference that you would like to discuss. Mm-hmm. Where are the common areas, mm-hmm. and where are they not currently?
Marriage equality, labor rights, indigenous rights. So these are the top three agenda-based, whether you're in government or you're opposition, that you could actually pass progressive laws that were initiated by us. I mean, if it's marriage equality, it's going to pass the upper house also. So it will be the first time in Southeast Asia, that's for sure. Maybe number 2 or number 3 in Asia after Taiwan and Nepal, that same-sex marriage is possible. The right to love, the right to grow a family, the right to decide, in their sick times of all the partners all around Thailand will be real and it will be true. The labor rights and indigenous rights passed just the first hearing, so there's a couple more work to do. But here are some examples of the common areas that we could work with. While there are some, of course, some differences in a couple of areas, important things, such as the military reform, just as the constitutional amendment. These are the two things that before the election we were the same. I mean, if we were sitting next to each other in debates, I think our answers were most aligned. But then after the election, we went separate ways. So we still have a lot of work to do to have some more consensus, building on those 2-3 important things that we still couldn't, look at each other face to face.
Those are many hot button issues that you just talked about: LGBT, labor, indigenous rights, and also you had briefly mentioned 112 before. I'm curious to know, do you feel that the country in general is becoming more divided? The population and society, are these issues causing people to dislike each other?
With the election results, I think one could assume that it was pretty much a consensus that they want change, and the last decade of the past 10 years under the military rule had to be gone. But the pity the pity is that, one whole full year that we had together was again divided into, I don't know what you call it. Maybe it's not left or right politics anymore, right? It's not progressive or conservative anymore. I guess it's 1% against that 99%. Like we flip it vertically rather. And that 1% of more of conservatives and elites still hold true. So yeah, I guess if you look at vertical equality in terms of wealth, in terms of income, in terms of natural resources access such as land or education, we're still a very unequal country in that sense. So, but whether people want change or not, I feel like that was pretty unanimous according to political accountability, or we had promised the voters before the votes and after the votes and things like that.
More recently, I've noticed that there are some politicians who have made it a point to either discredit the media or NIDA polls. Do you trust NIDA polls? Or should the population look at NIDA polls and feel that that's a reflection of the general population?
Obviously, there's various of them, and NIDA poll seems to be the most popular one. But because of my stats background from school, in any polls, without even judging look at the numbers, whether it's NIDA, whether it's Matichon, whether it's Daily News, whether it's Super Poll, I look at the sample size first, whether it's 2,000 or 50,000. I do how it's done, whether it's online only or whether it's always on the ground also. And then I also, we used to do a lot of our own polls to calibrate whether it means anything or not. But I think, in short, in America, when I went to school, polling is very important. But for me, in short, focus group is more important. So, yeah, maybe I look at all these polls, but then I want to hear, in a very comprehensive focus groups of what they think the future of people in the deep South should be, for example. I mean, this is real story. I mean, I want to hear it from someone who's from baby boomer to Gen Z down South, what they think should be the answer, this kind of civilian protection down South and things like that. So, yeah, polls are important, but not all.
You are now a member of the largest opposition party in Parliament, having prior said that you feel a strong opposition is important for healthy democracy. Mm-hmm. How does it feel to lead the opposition, even as the winner of the general election?
It's still a privilege. Yeah, I mean, I've been unduly suspended for about 6 months, during the prime minister's election the second time. And there was an article on my desk asking me to leave the parliament. And then 6 months later, I proved myself to be innocent and returned to the parliament. So, given my situation, what I can do is trying my best on each day of my duty. So I went to Parliament every day. I speak up almost every day. Like every week I have to talk about waste management, talk about indigenous rights, labor rights. I mean, I try to think of it as, if it was my last day. So I try my best to utilize my time as much as possible. Of course, I'm trying to find out the miracle and fight my case, because I'll be political banned for life. I can never run for public office ever again in my life. I mean, it's a premature death. I didn't plan to be MP or PM for the rest of my life. I don't want to be 86 and still sleeping inside the parliament. Maybe give it a 10-year time, from 40 to 50, and then I'll be irrelevant and pass on the baton to someone else. But this is only 5 years, so I still have a lot more that I wanted to do.
I mean, you were suspended and then you returned, and you work as if it's your last day. So, yeah, do you feel welcome in the parliament?
I feel indifferent. So whether they welcome me or they don't welcome me, there's like 500 MPs and I can't please them, or they're not all gonna like me and they're not all gonna hate me. But my constituents, people who I'm trying to please, the people of Thailand, whether they voted for me or they didn't vote for me, then they are still suffering from various challenges. So I'm trying to do that because I know that that 3 duties of a member of parliament: speak on the behalf of the people, pass progressive laws, provide check and balance to the government. So I try to do all these 3 to the fullest of my capability.
So to the present, You are effectively on trial for your campaign to amend Section 112. Generally speaking, is there freedom of speech in Thailand?
Depending on what kind of speech is that, which the answer is just because it's selective freedom of speech. So that means the freedom of speech is not at the fullest, is it?
Please elaborate.
Yeah, it's a selective freedom of speech. I mean, there are some, if it's beneficial to the establishment, then they allow, but if it's not the case, then it's not very welcome. The other way to put it is that there's freedom of speech, but there's a price for it.
What's the price?
It could be slap. It could be strategic lawsuit against public participation. It could be jail term. It could be ridding of political rights.
Do you feel that what you're experiencing is somewhat the price of freedom of speech?
The thing is, I don't think about this as a personal consequences, because this is going to be the fifth vicious cycle of party dissolution and banning of politicians. I see this more as a struggle between politics of appointed versus elected here in Thailand. And there's a tyranny of minority, which is the apparatus or mechanisms to fight against or to push back against elected officials. And that happened in the past 20 years.
You were blocked from becoming the prime minister, essentially, by military-appointed senators who will soon be replaced. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that a fresh Senate will be a functional tool under the same constitution? And will there be a new constitution?
I think that's up for debate. The way it's designed, it's very complex. I still very much don't understand it. You got to apply to be the senators to choose another senators, which is a network of messiness. But if we understand the system and we can game the system in a much better way, senators are very important to Thai politics as they appoint or they approve independent organizations, such as the Constitutional Court, such as anti-corruption, such as the election committee. So I think it's very important and critically difficult part of Thai politics. Let's put it that way.
A cult of personality has wreaked havoc on Western democracy. Move Forward Party has grown its movement through social media and merchandise, which I fully understand. Now, everywhere you go, people stand outside with cardboard cutouts of your face. Some of them even say that you are their prime minister. Does mass focus on your personality worry you as a potential distraction from your actual platform and their policies?
So, I appreciate the feelings and the encouragement that the Thai people give me everywhere I go, but I don't take it for granted. I mean, I would use that as an opportunity to explain something difficult, what CBAM is, since we probably have some French audience here, what PRTR is, and how it's important to the cadmium situation, and then they will listen. But I don't take it for granted that it's going to be forever, because nothing is forever. Eventually it will subside. Eventually it's going to come down, but it's the entire journey of our politics or our political platform that needs to sustain itself in order to bring about change that we desire.
But do you think that being a celebrity or being famous was an important part of your political platform?
With expectation comes higher responsibility. If I just show up for the photo op and social media spur, I mean, sooner or later they'll know that I'm there just for a celebrity setup rather than really doing some work and making sure that if this is about trade border issues, I have to pass it to Kun Rome, which is the president, and finally they ask the governor to come in and they ask these people from these various ministries to come in and really move change and fix problems for the people. Otherwise,
Sure.
They'll just have like high expectations of you and you under-deliver. So that's going to come down any day.
Frankly, is there an economic crisis right now?
There is an economic hardship.
What's the difference between that?
I'll tell you in a minute.
Hardship?
Thailand is the second largest economy in ASEAN. but we grew the slowest, number 2 slowest, just above Myanmar. I mean, and also very unequal, maybe top 3. Just giving the audience those top 3 sentences, they'll understand the kind of economic hardship if you're not at the top of the pyramid, the kind of inequality that the country is going through. Economic crises to me is Tom Yam Goong crisis where GDP dropped by about 40%, hamburger crisis where the GDP dropped by about 12% to be precise, COVID crisis where the GDP dropped by about 6.2%. Those are crises. But what we're facing now is a chronic outdate of our economic structure where we grew by about 2%. Our inflation is also about 2%. Our Thai baht currency is the second weakest in Japan. Our household debt is about 90%. So if we walk through it together, there's definitely something off. We used to grow by about 6.5% from 1960 to 1996. That's when the World Bank model of trickle-down economics. Have Toyota come in, build a factory, we're selling them some sweatshop, and hopefully it will come down to our laborers. But it's not the case anymore where we grew 1.8% last year according to the World Bank, where Cambodia is going by 5, or Philippines is going by 5, where foreign direct investment, Thailand is only above Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, behind Philippines. So you got to upgrade and update the economic structure, invest on the people, invest on the infrastructure, inclusive growth from the bottom up. So that's why our campaign, synchronized with a lot of people when we say you got to demilitarize, you got to demonopolize, you got to decentralize, so that Bangkok is not Thailand is not Bangkok. Make sure we're capable enough to fight off another pandemic or digital disruption or aging society. Make sure that it's a fair game, it's a firm ground, it's a fast growth, meaning all those corruptible, regulatory access. It has to be regulatory guillotine. Maybe half of it is gone. So there's no more discretion where people to ask you under the table. If you run for a factory, you got to ask 8 permits. You got to pay 8 times because they'll just slow you down for 6 months. And now you have spent so much money on your factory, you can't do anything because you have to wait for all these permits. And they're like, okay, maybe some tea money and I'll make it faster for you. So if we reduce all these things, fair game, make sure it's firm ground in terms of maybe irrigation, let's put it that way. If you're in Thailand long enough, you understand. Then we can start thinking about, all these cool things such as green financing and how to
how
fight
about
climate change.
an issue of the current government is casinos. Do you think the casinos will improve the economic situation in Thailand, or in general? Do you think what would the impact of legalizing casinos in Thailand be, economically or otherwise?
I mean, it will help, just like how Paris would have Olympics soon. I mean, it's a good on top to have some stimulus very quickly. It can bring underground money or overseas money, whether it's in Macau or in Cambodia, back in Thailand, but it's not going to be a big chunk of the economy. It might help, but not a lot.
Do you think that there are ways to sustain mass tourism, to promote mass tourism sustainably to Thailand, to protect the natural, there's so many natural treasures in Thailand.
That's how I got into politics.
Tell me,
because of what happened in tsunami happened down south, and I was working for a consulting firm, and then the government asked for a proposal on sustainable tourism, and that's when I found out that the cost of tourists is more than the revenue of a tourist.
That's what I mean.
And if Bang San is gone, it's gone. Yeah? So we were looking at different models, maybe the Maldives and the Bhutan, where it doesn't have to be a mass tourism as per your vocabulary, but then have a more a high spending with the minimum, so that you could have a balance between the tourism dollars as well as the environment. But as of now, I think the biggest headline, the issue with our tourism is its concentration. So 70% of tourism dollars that comes into Thailand remains in the top 5 destinations only. Bangkok, Phuket, Chiang Mai, Krabi, and Chonburi. And the 71 provinces get maybe 25% of the tourism dollars that comes in. The bigger question is how do we decentralize or disperse the tourism dollars so that it's beneficial to the remaining country as well. Otherwise, you have more festivals, you have, more casinos and more attractions, more man-made, human-made destinations, but then the tourism will be just concentrated by the privileged few, and then the remaining other ones who will have to bear the high cost of living, high cost of real estates, and these are the things that follow up from tourism.
So speaking
Garbage paradise in Phuket, for example.
Yes, and also though, like for speaking of like the individuals or the other 75% of people who may not be receiving the benefit of tourism, I'm curious about soft power because soft power is a buzzword these days. So generally speaking, I feel that it's an issue that everyone in the government can agree. It's important for the economy. It's a good way to put Thailand back on the world stage. But I'm curious about your take on soft power, and the personal aspect of that would be, what's your favorite Thai soft power? Is there too much focus on soft power?
Well, the person who invented the word soft power is Joseph Now, back in Harvard. I didn't go to class with him, but Fuadi, my foreign advisor, did, and he said the definition is co-op rather than coerce, getting people to do what you want through cooperation rather than coercion, which is probably the opposite of hard power, where you do sanctions or you have like weapons and things like that. Creative economy, is something that Thailand can do, and it's something that has been discussed for many, many years, whether it's the food, the fare, the fight, the things that the government is trying to do now, which is one thing, but it's really not soft power to me. If we were to focus on just the creative economy, I feel like the writing part in Thailand has to be boosted. Just to talk about what the current regime is doing, they might have some music, which the private sector is already good. They have the cinema side, they have the talk show side and things like that. But the writing is something, if you compare Thai soft power to Korean soft power back in the days, they just focus so much on writing. Because if you're writing a script, you're writing a talk show, you're writing about the movies, you're writing music, writing literature is something that is very important. So if this is whatever you want to call it creative economy or soft power, and if you were to do this well, you got to really focus on books, on literature here in Thailand, so that when you do a series and they have 50 script writers to do a show, then we have that kind of talent pipeline to make sure that T-Wave is as good as K-Wave. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. My favorite soft power in Thailand is Mai Pen Rai. That's similar to whether it's Nixon of the Netherlands, whether it's Hukka of the Scandinavians and things. It's really the way of life. It's really understanding the comprehensiveness, the diversity that the country is. It might be a beautiful chaos here in Thailand. But the ability for people to come together, that's really the Thainess, the Thai soft power that any other parts of the world don't really have the kind of direct translation to their own word. And I feel like that's a kind of cooperation that people wanted to come to this country rather than coming here just for a quick festival and return.
And a lot of people have actually told me that Mai Pen Rai is the source of many problems in Thai society because it's Mai Pen Rai and we don't focus on it again. So I'm just curious, do you think that there's a downside to Mai Pen Rai?
Oh, obviously. And there's obviously downside to Hukka and Nixon and Sisu, the Finnish as well, or Wabi Sabi or Kintsugi of Japanese. But it's really a way of life in Thailand that, there's some good things about it. We stay in the present. We don't worry so much about the future. We don't, linger on to the past. It's also Buddhism involved. But I think if we have this Mai Pen Rai in our DNA, Mai Pen Rai will try again. Mai Pen Rai will make it better this time. Maybe there's some switch to that that we definitely need to improve on the Thainess. And hopefully this kind of soft power, this kind of definition, this kind of Thainess would change gradually over time.
How do you envision Thailand's role in Myanmar's future?
More diverse, more comprehensive. I think the government is way too obsessed with engaging only the SAC, but there's the EROs, which is the border states with Thailand. There's NUG. Various of them have come to Thailand and have asked for meetings with the high-level official of governments and were turned down. And if we were to really understand the changing dynamics of the Myanmar politics with just engaging the SAC, you wouldn't be able to understand what's going on in Karenni state or Shan state. And you wouldn't be able to fix Myanmar problems as well as Thailand problems. Online scam, transboundary haze, drugs trafficking. I mean, these are arguably within the border, 2,000 kilometers border states between Thailand and Myanmar. So if you don't engage these people, you won't be able to fix all these problems because you keep engaging Tatmador and Napidor in SAC, which have nothing to do with the areas that you are trying to focus on. How I would handle this differently is, in order for me to get a better understanding, it has to be a diverse and comprehensive views. Within Thailand itself, we need inter-agency task force because the foreign minister can't really order the defense minister what to do, right? And vice versa. There's already an order to organize something like this, but the prime minister is not the head. Pran Pri is the head. Then it's still the same problems. Lastly, on humanitarian corridor is not humanitarian if it's biased towards one side of the group. I mean, going through Myanmar Red Cross is okay, and it's a good first step, but there's tend to be a biased assistance towards a certain group. So you might need to think about second step and the third step on how having a parallel humanitarian assistance will help the dire situation of humanitarian needs rather than escalating the situation by giving a biased humanitarian assistance to a certain group.
Is there some form of timeline for a peaceful solution for the situation in Thailand's Deep South, which is still under martial law?
Well, we got to stop that martial law first and have the kind of civilian protection within the area. Otherwise, we have spent maybe 500 billion baht total for the past 10 years, and violence is profitable in some areas, because you want to make sure that the budget keeps going to that area, so you want to make sure that the violence continues and things like that. There's that kind of hypothesis. I'm not saying that it's true. I don't have the evidence to prove on camera, but then the thing is, because people kept saying that because of martial law, because of the military rule, which is different, then the entire region can't really prosper to its potential finally. During the election campaign, and we were talking about decentralization so they can self-determine, be part of Thailand, and now finally think about food security rather than the national security, because it's almost non-existent after 15 to 16 years of nothing. And in Deep South, it's the youngest voters. I mean, I look at every district. People below 40, 55% are all in the Deep South. So they're all about the future. The question is, if the current government is sincere about reducing all these budgets, reducing all these violence, you got to make sure that you treat them as, a normal situation, and if it's something bad happen, it's a civilian approach to it rather than the army approach to it. Otherwise, it will keep prolonging like this for 10 more years. Obviously, it's good for the people down south in the sense that, the budget will keep continuing. It will be like $1 trillion in the next 10 years, but it doesn't go directly to the people in the deep south.
So to be more to the point, the current prime minister told me that the approach to solving the issue in the south should be economy first, because I'm worried about the military situation. Are you saying that the economy first approach is not the way? That the military situation, like the ISOC, has to be dissolved first?
A quick one would be a hybrid one, maybe in a 2 or 3 year term that you are starting to transfer the power from the martial law, from the Security Council that is monopolized just by the military, into a hybrid between civilian and military committee on how you want to take care of the situation, reducing the barricades, bit by bit, and within that 3-year or 4-year term, you are hoping that it will be a civilian-led, multicultural area, once again, without any martial law and things like that, without any barricades and things like that. Then, the economy can come in the first place. But how can you have a lot of tourists coming in when there's still barricades every time you go if you're not the prime minister?
That's correct.
I mean, if you go down to Hat Yai and you get checkpoints maybe 3 or 4 times, which is not really the case because it's quite a serene, pristine, with a lot of nature to offer. There's a lot of economic potential for sure, but you got to really take care of all these misguided military protection just to lift it up, and then make sure you have the kind of civilian infrastructure such as healthcare and education, and make sure that the dire level of inequality is no longer the issue. Then we can talk about economics.
Marijuana was legalized without much regulation or regulatory framework, and it has grown into quite a large business, which this government is denying. Should marijuana be recriminalized?
I don't know what the process would be look like and what the right word for it. It should be medical cannabis with certain areas of recreational based on referendum and things like that. I'll tell you in a minute. The balance between the benefit and the cost of marijuana has to be in place here in Thailand and starting to liberalize bit by bit. Perhaps, the right way to do it is, medical cannabis with recreational zones in some cities. Having some referendums in Phuket, referendums in Krabi, whether the entire population wants it to be recreational or not. Within Bangkok, it has to be maybe in certain areas that allows cafes and things like that. The way they have done it here is that we're in the Sukhumvit Road. There's even more than 7-Eleven. And my daughter's school is over there, and there's 3 cannabis shop in front of it. It's too recreational. It's too fast. It's way too much. I grew up in Boston, and I'm epileptic. So I have my epilepsy. I started learning about medical cannabis back in 2000. And then I spent some time in Boston. It took them 8 years from medical to be recreational. People got to learn. I know about it because I've been using it. My mother doesn't. My niece and my nephews don't know about it, whether it's beneficial or the cost of doing it. So it has to be in a balance between medical and recreational, and slowly, gradually opening it up maybe to a particular zone, to a particular area. You got to have your license to do it. If it's for tourism destination, just do a referendum with that area and have that kind of, quietly or slowly opening it up. But what happened in Thailand was that, boom, they opened it first and they're starting to close. Okay, the parks, you cannot do it. The movie theater, you cannot do it. So they open it up and then they close bit by bit. So that's why we ended up with, oversupply of marijuana if you use it, and also the cost outweighs the benefit of legalizing it. So we want to make sure that we do it in a balanced way, in the right cadence, so that the benefits outweighs the cost, and it can be slower to that sense. I think that's the outcome of the vision I have for marijuana legalization here in Thailand. Whether it should be recriminalized, that's probably not it. Maybe legalize first, yes. Maybe I'll legalize it back again and start opening it gradually rather than opening it up and trying to close it.
Okay.
Close first and then open. So people can really learn about their tolerance about marijuana to make sure that when they use it, it's for the good use and for the benefit rather than the cost.
Yes or no? Do you feel that you will be banned from politics following the Constitutional Court's decision in the coming weeks?
Because the way you structure the question, it limits my freedom to answer. You got to give me the benefit back by documenting the entire answer. Yes, I believe I could be banned because looking at historical records, Thailand is very famous for, banning politicians that are elected from the people. But I'm trying to change my feelings. So I'm trying to fight tooth and nail, finding ways to prove that my assistance outweigh the benefit of it, my assistance outweigh my absence. And I'm trying to find legal ground to fight my case, which is proportionality of law, which is to explain to them that to rid someone from their political platform because of insurrection and treason, you got to be very precise on the definition of treason and insurrection. And let's do it together. For me, to consider a treason or insurrection, one is military coup. That's clearly an insurrection. Number two is that if you're conspiring with a foreign government, to their advantage, that's insurrection. If you are changing the form of the governance of the country, if you're trying to separate regions, all these things are insurrection. But to have an attempted amendment of a criminal code, for you to really think about it as, or equate it as treason and insurrection, is beyond imagination. Even to the election committee, someone filed for it, before the election, and they felt like it was not insurrection or overthrowing governance. They just allowed it on various debates on TV, including, all the conversations with the international media. They're asking whether, criminal code amendment 112 is doable. Everyone asked that kind of questions, even the current prime minister, even the current party leader, even the current justice minister answered the same question in some way or form similar to what I said. So the definition of Thai treason or insurrection in a constitutional monarchy like Thailand was formed on January 31st, I would argue. And, when we were campaigning, it was probably about a year ago. So it happened before when the definition was formed by the Constitutional Court. And you can't really punish someone backwards, can you? And also proportionality of law, like I said, it's amended criminal code. It hasn't happened yet. And to take away someone's political rights to run for public office for life. It's a lifetime ban with the Anti-Corruption Committee. I feel like that's a bit over proportion.
Some people don't get to stay, whereas you would be banned for life, but you wouldn't have to leave. Do you ever worry that your work would put you in a position to where it wouldn't be possible for you to stay here anymore?
No, I feel like, Thailand is home. But yes, the thing is, if I want to do it, I want to do it voluntarily. Like if Thailand doesn't want me, then the world is my oyster. I might return to some universities and grow more leaders, next generation leaders of ASEAN, and maybe, in Stanford or something like that.
Are you worried about the future of democracy in Thailand?
What's democracy to begin with? I think it's, transfer of power, it's freedom of speech, the ability to control the agenda, and also the separation of power. If you look at all these things, there's people who, including myself, a peaceful assembly that they consider a protest, then you get jail terms. Freedom of the press, I feel like that's okay. The transfer of power through elections, that's something that is worrying about in the sense that there's a politics of elected versus appointed, and the choice of the people doesn't directly translate to governance. That's my worrying. But if you're looking whether at the human rights organization or the Economist, we slipped the hardest last year, just maybe behind Pakistan and some in Bangladesh or something like that. So I think it's flawed democracy that we need to really continue fighting so that it's finally a democracy, not just 4 seconds in the ballots and we call ourselves democracy. It could be autocracy that allows elections. It could be a dictatorship that allows 4 seconds in the ballots. So you got to be really careful about this because they're much smarter in the way they do it. It doesn't have to be a military coup. It could be just judicial coup. It doesn't have to be warfare on the streets. It could be lawfare in the courtroom. It doesn't have to be violence on the street. It could be just violence in the courtroom because it's more discreet. It's a smarter way of clinging onto power. So you got to be on top of your game and really call it off and really understanding what's going on.
The entire world is listening, hypothetically. You have about a week or two left until this decision from the Constitutional Court is made. What would you say?
I get a lot of encouragement, a lot of support from various international communities. I also understand that international relations sometimes can be interest-based or value-based, But think about the new world order that is going through, the kind of far-right ideology and democratic backsliding that is happening all around the world, including this region, whether it's Cambodia, whether it's Myanmar, whether it's Thailand, in different level of degree, but Thailand is also something that is suffering for that, So in the end, it's not the words of our enemy, but the silence of our friends. Quoted Martin Luther King, just to be on the record that I didn't make the word up myself.
Okay, Pita Limjaroenrat, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Take care. Thank
You
you.
too.
Thank you so much.